This has been mean the last few months.
Non, c'est important de rappeler que l'Homo sapiens, nous sommes des mammifères sociaux et de la famille des grands singes.
I need to make a video about this.
Mais non, mais vous pouvez pas dire ça. À la télévision, on les jette dans la Méditerranée. Vous vous rendez compte de ce que vous dites ?
Oui, oh, bon, ça va.
Non, ça va pas.
I need to make a video about this.
Mes chers collègues, en hommage au jeune Quentin, je vous demande d'observer 1 minute de silence.
I need to make a video about this. Well, yeah, the French presidential elections are happening in just a year. The far right is clearly leading in the polls as the media landscape shifts more and more to the right. Well, I wouldn't be able to predict the exact outcome of the elections. What I can say is that it's going to be increasingly tense. So I felt like it was the right time to sit down and go through the major events that happened in the last year or so and that will likely shape the outcome of the next election. So I printed 4 pages, 4 different elements in French political discourse in the last year or so that not only help us understand French politics, but also what's at stake for the next election. Are you ready for this? Okay, let's go. Okay, so let's start with this picture. This is Bali Bagayoko. Some call him the French Obama for no other reason than the fact that he's black. Take it as a little teaser from what comes next. Bali Bagayoko was just elected mayor of Saint-Denis, the second most populous city in the Île-de-France county, right after Paris. He's built his career from the ground up, starting out in local community work in Saint-Denis before becoming mayor in 2026. Over time, this local engagement grew into a broader political role with La France Insoumise, France Unveiled, where he's become known for focusing on social issues, public services, and representing urban communities. Bali Bagayoko easily won the election on the night of the first round. Here you can see him and his supporters celebrating the victory with music, dancing, and excitement, but corporate media and political opponents read this joyful moment differently, unleashing a wave of racist attacks and suspicion, eventually culminating in government-level condemnation. So, let me tell you what happened. It all started on that very evening when Bagayoko was interviewed remotely by the host of a popular news show. When asked about his victory, Bagayoko used an old expression reminiscent of Saint-Denis' royal history, the city of kings and the living people, insisting on the living people. Now, listen to it carefully again.
La ville des rois et du peuple vivant.
La ville des rois et du peuple vivant. La ville des rois, roi means kings, and roi sounds a bit like another French word. Noir. I'm sure some of you already know where this is going. The next day, a popular radio host asked Bali Bagayoko about this interview and said this.
Désormais, alors que un de mes confrères vous interrogeait sur la ville des rois, vous disiez c'est aussi la ville des noirs. Est-ce que ça compte pour vous?
Okay, let's pause this for a second. We'll get back to this, but I first want to tell you about the sponsor of today's video. In the last year or so, I've developed a bit of an obsession with privacy, and honestly, for good reason. There are people out there who will gather whatever information they can find on you to threaten, to stalk, to cross lines that should never be crossed. It's scary, I won't lie, but I'm not gonna stop making videos because I love this too much. What I can do though is make sure I'm taking every possible precaution to protect everything outside of this frame. I mean, after doing a lot of research myself, I realized something pretty concerning. No one's really safe. Our data is constantly being collected, bought, sold, and repackaged by companies you've probably never heard of. Your address, your phone number, even information about your family can just exist online. And that's the part most people don't see. It's not just out there, it's being actively traded, which is exactly why I started looking for ways to take that control back. That's where today's sponsor, Enquiries, comes in. Enquiries is a service that helps remove your personal data from data brokers and people's search sites, basically all those places collecting and selling your information without you even knowing. They reach out on your behalf, request removals, and keep doing it over time because this stuff can pop back up again. And with Enquiries, a custom removal feature, if you find a site with your information on it, just send the link over to Enquiries and they will deal with it for you. So this is how simple it is. Step 1 is setting up the account. Step 2 is to authorize Enquiries to remove your personal data on your behalf. And step 3, you just relax and let them do the hard work. Those data brokers, scammers, they can't harm you if they can't find you. So take your personal data back with Enquiries, use code CAPPELLE, CAPPELLE at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan. That's enquiries.com/CAPPELLE. Thank you, Enquiries, for sponsoring the video, and now let's go back to it. The city of blacks, la ville des noirs. He never said that. He never said that, but right after the interview, many far-right accounts on X spread this misinformation, which made its way into the radio host's mouth, to an audience of hundreds of thousands of people. Bagayoko politely corrected her, and she later apologized, but that was just the beginning. Later on CNews, our French Fox News, a commentator was asked his opinion on Bagayoko's victory and out of nowhere developed an analysis based on the comparison with apes and Homo sapiens.
Non, c'est important de rappeler que l'Homo sapiens, nous sommes des mammifères sociaux et de la famille des grands singes.
On that same TV channel, a so-called philosopher built on that metaphor and pushed it even further.
La bande a gagné, donc la bande va imposer sa loi. Et la bande qui a imposé sa loi dit maintenant c'est allégeance. Mais ça c'est très tribal. On fait l'allégeance au mâle dominant. Ce monsieur n'est pas un mâle dominant, enfin, je ne sache pas.
All the commentators wondered whether France was still for them and if they could still run as candidates in future elections. You see, one black man wins a big city and those people are losing their minds. On other more respectable channels, the newly elected mayor was asked about connections with drug dealers, a suspicion that again grew in far-right circles and wasn't backed by any fact. Racism was unleashed, yet the condemnations of it were weak and slow. Bagayoko had to call out the government to trigger reactions. The Minister of the Interior condemned the racism lightly. The minister in charge of fighting against discrimination didn't even say a word. And our President Emmanuel Macron barely said anything either. Racism was unleashed and unchecked. Some will say this isn't surprising, and to be fair, this wasn't just about Bali Bagayoko. Black and brown candidates for the mayoral elections faced unprecedented waves of racist attacks on social media throughout their campaigns. Some even questioned whether they should keep going. Others feared for their safety, and death threats came their way. Speaking of death threats, this is the message that La France Insoumise, so France Unveiled, received on February 18th. In it, an anonymous individual threatens to bomb the HQ of the party, cursing at black and brown people as well as leftists. It concludes by saying, quote, "You're gonna pay for the murder of Quentin." Many times over. Who's Quentin, you might be asking? Well, there he is. This is our second picture. The story of his death kind of mirrors that of Charlie Kirk in the US. In fact, I picked this picture because of how it reminded me of the Charlie Kirk AI post depicting him as an angel. This image was put on real banners and posters, and the interesting thing about it is that this is not even Quentin. There he is, that's Quentin. Quentin is half Peruvian and half French, but somehow people wanted him to look like a typical young white Frenchman. So Quentin de Ranc was a neo-fascist activist from Lyon. On the 14th of February, he died after a fight with anti-fascist activists, hundreds of meters away from a conference by Rima Hassan, a voice for Palestinian rights in France and a France Unveiled representative at the European Parliament. She was invited to Lyon for a conference and was met by an organization called Nemesis, a far-right collective led by Alice masquerading as a women's rights organization. In academic terms, we call this femo-nationalism. It refers to the way feminist ideas and women's rights rhetoric is used often selectively or instrumentally to support nationalist and anti-immigration or xenophobic political agendas. For example, Nemesis raises awareness about cases of SA but tends to focus specifically on those committed by people of color. But anyway, they showed up at the conference in the hope of triggering local leftists and anti-fascist activists. It's a strategy they use to paint the left as violent on their social media and on TV. They purposely position themselves as bait to draw anti-fascist activists and let their neo-fascist friends do the rest of the job. That's what happened on February 13th. Fascist and anti-fascist groups met hundreds of meters away from the conference and started a fight, which left many of them wounded, including Quentin de Ranc, who was still alive after the altercation. Some videos filmed after the fight even show him standing up, clearly unwell but afraid to call the police as his bloody fists could put him in a tricky situation. Instead, he and his friends walked away for a bit and eventually called an ambulance as Quentin's physical state worsened. He died the next day at the hospital. Suddenly, all eyes were on Lyon. France Unveiled was immediately accused of being responsible for Quentin's death, as it happened in the context of Rima Hassan's conference, and as a member of the group of Antifas who showed up is connected to a France Unveiled representative. And the bomb threat followed.
Il leur a été dit que des menaces de bombes installées à l'intérieur des locaux avaient été reçues par la police et que c'était la raison pour laquelle ils nous demandaient d'évacuer le siège pour pouvoir faire une vérification à l'intérieur.
As days passed by, more and more information was gathered on who Quentin really was. What did he believe in? Independent media like Street Press or Le Canard Réfractaire and later Mediapart did most of the investigative work mainstream journalism didn't bother doing. And what they found was Horrible, to say the least. Quentin was quite clearly a neo-Nazi. He praised Hitler, he used racist and sexist slurs, anti-Semitism, he called for violence, and even wrote, quote, "We want fascism." There's no ambiguity, no dog whistle, no subtext. It was all there on his social media platforms for anyone to see. But that was too late. In the emotional turmoil that his death caused, the parliament voted to give him a minute of silence. Media and politicians had already reversed the narrative. You see, Quentin was a young Christian man praised by his friends. He had died from leftist violence. The lesson to take from this was that leftism, specifically France Unbowed, was a threat to French society. You see, in a couple of decades, the National Rally, with the help of establishment parties, managed to not only detoxify itself in the eyes of French society, but also displace that toxicity onto the radical left, onto France Unbound, which condemned the use of violence but refused to condemn the Antifa group that fought Quentin and his friends, as this Antifa group was created in Lyon in 2018 to resist local fascist groups and protect minorities and leftist organizations.
Ils sont venus avec des battes de baseball, ils m'ont brisé le pare-brise avant, pare-brise arrière, ils nous ont défoncé la voiture, une attaque violente, ils ont voulu me tuer quoi. Avec mon épouse, mon bébé derrière, on l'a traité de sale arabe, on va vous tuer.
But that didn't matter. Quentin's neo-Nazi friends were invited on TV to share how great he was. Nemesis was also invited on TV to share their side of the story, later contradicted by videos and reports. A protest paying tribute to Quentin was authorized in Lyon. As you can imagine, Nazi salutes were made, insults were thrown at minorities, the most radical far-right groups were present, and we just stood there, watching.
D'observer une minute de silence.
Okay, so we covered this one and this one. Now it's time to move on to this one. Nouvelle France simply means New France, and no, this is not a reference to the French North American colonies of the 1700s. This concept has just re-emerged in French political discourse with a completely different meaning and has led to a moral panic. So let me first explain what New France means. This concept was put forward by France Unbowed's Research Institute led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Broadly speaking, it refers to a France that is evolving, shaped by cultural mixing, migration backgrounds, and the lived realities of working class and urban communities. It highlights a society that is more diverse and younger, and that no longer fits the traditional image of a homogeneous nation. In this context, New France also presents those populations as a driving force in politics and democracy, stressing their growing role in social movements and elections. So overall, the idea reflects a vision of a society in transformation, transformed by those on the margins, resisting capitalist forces, seeking to crush them. I mean, whether you like it or not, it sounds like an interesting new idea, but what does it mean concretely? Well, after the municipal elections in France last month, which led to the victory of a number of black and brown candidates affiliated with France Unbowed, journalists and commentators immediately made the connection with New France, which they understood mainly in racial terms. To them, New France means black and brown people. France Unbowed is the party of black and brown people.
L'un des exemples de cette nouvelle France, sans qu'on sache précisément ce que ça veut dire, est-ce que cette nouvelle France, il faut nous expliquer à nos auditeurs. Est-ce que c'est une question de, je vois que ça vous fait sourire, de couleur de peau, d'origine? C'est quoi cette nouvelle France?
This assumption has been running for a while. It really started during our last legislative elections when a prominent left-wing figure revealed that he used two different leaflets based on who he was canvassing. The one with Mélenchon's face on it was used in diverse low-income neighborhoods. The one without his face was used in white working-class and middle-class communities. This triggered a serious split in what we called the New Popular Front, the left-wing alliance. In that chaos, old figures of the left establishment re-emerged, including former President François Hollande, further cementing that split between a reformist, universalist front and a more socialist, anti-racist front, represented by France Unbowed. This sharp split is only going to get stronger as the election approaches. Many social democrats have already distanced themselves from Mélenchon, in the same way that establishment Democrats are distancing themselves from Hassan Piker in the US, or Labour distanced itself from Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. Nobody is exempt from criticism, but it's pretty obvious that it's not just about them, it's about what they stand for. Mélenchon stands for what he calls New France. As we mentioned earlier, this concept reflects ongoing changes in society and in the economy. For example, a lot of us have gone to university, secured a degree, but many are struggling with debt, with rent, with buying a place, with affording to raise a kid. In the past, a degree was a guarantee of a good pay and social social mobility, today things aren't as secure anymore. Another example, a couple of decades ago, the concept of the gig economy entered the chat. People could do extra gigs outside of their main job to earn a decent living. Today, the gig economy, the economy of freelancers and micro-entrepreneurs, is a career path for many people, and it is insanely precarious. So thinking that we can speak about the economy or what a left-wing program should be without taking into account those changes, without reconsidering who we stand for and what the working class is in the 21st century, is not good enough. Nouvelle France seeks to mobilize groups in society that may or may not identify with the historical blue-collar white working class, but nevertheless feel the pressure of the capitalist economy, destabilizing their future, and fear the rise of white nationalist forces. So yeah, it's about mobilizing people who have given up voting or have lost hope in the transformative power of politics. That's what Nouvelle France wants to embody. Does it do it well? We'll see in the next elections. What's clear now is that this strategy is very different from the re-emerging establishment left. You see, those people were quite happy that working class people, including people of color, didn't really vote anymore. They had turned to the center, adopted neoliberal policies, and softened their advocacy for minority rights into a universalist, humanist approach, which allowed them to avoid taking a clear stance on controversial topics like police brutality or the right to wear a hijab. In some cases, they even supported more brutality and more division, like it was the case during François Hollande's presidency from 2012 to 2017. A presidency that accelerated the establishment left's neoliberal turn, triggered the creation of the leftist party France Unbowed, and set the stage for neoliberal baby girl Emmanuel Macron. France Unbowed therefore took on the role that the establishment left had given up. They maintain an uncompromising anti-capitalist stance and stand for all minorities, including the French Muslim community, by naming their oppression, Islamophobia, and defending their dignity and rights on corporate media and in parliament, as no one will listen to them directly. This is quite uncomfortable for an elite of establishment politicians and media figures who now have to face that their so-called humanist values aren't as universal as they make them seem. Sure, they don't agree with far-right conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement Theory, the idea that France will be taken over by black and brown people, but still, seeing Bali Bagayoko win Saint-Denis and seeing the surprising success of France Unbowed did trigger them a bit. That's why journalists kept respectfully asking if Bagayoko's win was what Mélenchon meant by New France. That question was asked so often that we started to see the implication behind it. It's almost a dog whistle at this point. They say New France, but what they mean is black and brown people, which is only one component of the definition given by La Boétie's Institute. In a similar vein, political and media elites are getting increasingly comfortable with the assumption that anti-Zionism is used as covert anti-Semitism aimed at getting the attention of French Muslims. The implication being that French Muslims are essentially anti-Semitic. Look at this clip of an interview with France Unbowed representative by one of the most established French journalists out there, Nathalie Saint-Cric.
Il existe dans le pays, d'accord? Ça existe.
Et la quête du vote musulman aussi.
Alors déjà, là, je vous reproche, pourquoi vous faites ce lien? Pourquoi, quand je parle d'antisémitisme, vous faites un lien avec la quête du vote musulman? Quel est le rapport? Pensez-vous qu'il y a des gens qui sont antisémites pour aller chercher le vote musulman?
Ah oui?
Moi, je trouve ça intolérable.
Nathalie Saint-Cric was criticized for this. A wave of call-outs from viewers and listeners followed. Hearing such assumptions on public service TV felt outrageous for many. Some of us haven't lost our moral compass, luckily, but these sort of assumptions are heard all the time on the most watched 24/7 news channel in France called CNews. We've shown this logo a few times now. This is CNews. I usually describe it as the French Fox News or the French GB News. It's owned by the super powerful media mogul Vincent Bolloré, a fervent conservative who uses his various media platforms, both in print and digital media, to push a Christian nationalist agenda. This guy is incredibly powerful, and CNews might be his most controversial project. The channel presents itself as a news channel, but most of the shows are commentary produced by a variety of right-wing and far-right commentators. It's cheap to produce, it's the same racist, sexist, classist talking points on repeat, and it's been getting a lot of views. So many views that other media are looking at them for inspiration, shifting the overtone window more and more to the right. It's on CNews that Bali Bagayoko was compared to apes and Homo sapiens, the sort of comparisons that would never be used if the man was white. Comments of that sort are quite common on CNews, leading to waves of call-outs to the French audiovisual regulatory agency ARCOM. In 2025, for example, when ARCOM was deciding which channel could renew their license and which couldn't, CNews was heavily questioned. The channel is listed as a news channel channel, yet doesn't respect pluralism rules. When progressives are invited on their show, they are attacked from all sides by a group of biased commentators to the degree that many now refuse to go, knowing that their presence on the show isn't productive at all. CNews, on the other hand, regularly complains that fewer and fewer progressives accept their invitations, as pluralism remains an important metric to stay in good standing with Arcom. Recently, CNews launched a new show called 100% Frontières, 100% Borders, in which Alice Cordier, the leader of Nemesis, the femo-nationalist group we talked about earlier, appears regularly alongside other representatives of far-right media platforms. Now, many of these younger influencers and activists are actually operating under the influence of the American ultra-conservative Atlas network, which extends its influence in France through concrete ties with French actors who relay and adapt its ideas locally. French influencers and activists like Alice Cordier are trained and supported through these structures, translating US-style libertarian and Trumpist narratives into the French context, especially among young political trainees and online commentators. So yeah, my guy is keeping an eye, but also influencing what's going on in France. The death of Charlie Kirk, for example, strengthened those transnational alliances, and the death of Quentin Durand turned into an opportunity to push far-right ideas into the mainstream, culminating in the Minute of Silence in Parliament. Actually, in preparation for this video, I asked a bunch of French people what was the moment in French politics in the last 6 months or year that shocked them the most, and that Minute of Silence came up a lot. Many of us sat there watching TV, unsure of how we ended up paying tribute to a self-proclaimed neo-Nazi. Now, CNews will continue to spread its divisive propaganda up to the presidential elections of 2027, but I really want to emphasize the fact that this isn't just about CNews. More and more corporate media are cozying up with far-right politicians and far-right talking points. Some see the potential of producing content for millions of people who voted and plan to vote for the far-right. Others are falling for their detoxification campaign, claiming that what they stand for isn't as bad as people make you think. And then other media are simply friends with them. They go to lunch with them, they chat, they text, and on TV they avoid asking difficult questions like why Marine Le Pen's party, the National Rally, stole millions from the EU, and why Jordan Bardella, the likely far-right candidate, took part in this criminal activity. This lack of accountability and the progressive disappearance of cutting-edge journalism as billionaires buy up the sector leads people to turn more and more to alternative or independent media. And this is probably where the next elections will be determined, online, through these new media reaching hundreds of thousands, even millions of viewers. I believe they will play a big role in circulating information, but also in organizing real-life actions. A combination of the two seems to be the right recipe to secure a victory in the 2027 elections. So I looked at the variety of polls, but let's be honest, polls can be very, very misleading. Since 1995, polls conducted 1 year before the French presidential elections have been wrong 50% of the time. We're still not 100% sure Marine Le Pen will be able to run for president, as she's accused of embezzlement of parliamentary EU funds through a fake job scams. But that's no longer a source of worry for her party, as young and charismatic Jordan Bardella is already overtaking her in many polls, with scores ranging from 30 to 38%. Now keep in mind that the National Rally scores tend to be overestimated. On the contrary, France Unveiled has seen its performance underestimated in recent elections, especially during the municipal elections, which were a big surprise for many. But yeah, it's quite likely that Jordan Bardella will reach the second round of the elections. Our elections function in 2 rounds. His opponent is likely to be one of these 3 people: Edouard Philippe, the head of Horizon, a friend of Emmanuel Macron and the establishment right. Then you have Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the leader of France Unveiled, the French leftist party, and then you have Raphael Glucksmann, a social democrat who works with people who worked with Macron and is a strong advocate of the EU. Now, I want to say that any of those candidates could get to the second round, but the way they would perform in that second round is absolutely unknown, because the prospect of having a far-right president is deeply scary to a lot of people who could put pressure on politicians to build alliances to block a national rally victory, like they did in previous elections. Now, yeah, I think that was helpful. This will probably be my last video on French politics until the election period, but if you want to get updates, you can subscribe to this channel. I post off updates on the YouTube community section, but you can also follow me on Instagram. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them in the comment section. I'm sure other people will be able to answer. I'll check the comment section as well, in case I can provide some answers too. So yeah, if you ask me how I feel about the election as a French person, I would say that I'm realistic and optimistic. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, people are working, organizing, doing everything they can to avoid the worst case scenario. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Before I leave, I would like to say a big thank you to Enquiries for sponsoring the video. Take your personal data back with Enquiries. You can use my code CAPPELLE, CAPPELLE, at the link below and get 60% off your annual plan. The link is in the description box. Also, a big thank you to my patrons for their support and a special thank to top tier patrons. I'm literally a Fork, Ahmed, Shunak, Sibev, Jose Bailey, Nofal Shamari, Fred, Hongxing Wang, Paul-Louis Agenot, Patrick Button, Jeff Lee, Taya Matin, Nick, Brandon, Jim Siddle, Ojoal, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Corigi, Tristan, Christopher, Ian, Donage, Alex, Manuel, Christopher France, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. Okay, I'll see you very soon.